Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining Michigan CNC webinar. This is Ted Goff here, and tonight we have a special guest. His name is Chet Weatherl. He's from Washington. He owns his own woodworking business, and today he's going to talk a little bit about vacuum bagging. I just want to remind you that if you want to see any of these recorded videos, they're on YouTube. All you have to do is search Michigan CNC webinars and tips, and they'll come up, and all the past webinar recordings are there. Feel free to listen to them, watch them, and some of them there may not be any photos or anything in the beginning, but just shortly after it starts, the photos will come up and the video will start working. So I'm going to go ahead and pass on the presentation role to our guest speaker, and I'm going to let him go ahead and introduce himself and tell us a little bit about him. So Chet, you'll have to accept that, and then your screen should pop up.
All right.
Okay, and just one last thing, guys. If your screen is not full screen, go ahead and maximize it on your computer, and you'll get full screen. Thank you, Chet, for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. Hello, gentlemen. My name is Chet. I have been making and selling wooden products for a little over 10 years now. What I do now are a lot of shadow boxes. Shadow boxes are military display items where the retiree or family of a deceased person can store and display their awards that they have received during their time of service. This one here is Master Gunnery Sergeant, Marine Corps, and he wanted his to have doors on it so that he didn't display his awards at all times. And the doors open up. The etch in the glass there is a pineapple. Looks like a pineapple, but it's actually a bomb. Those of you who are familiar with that rank will have seen that before. The emblem, the rank here, is made of bloodwood and yellow heart. Those two woods will stay that color for forever. They'll only get deeper red and deeper yellows. The cherry is the main body of the box on this one. I've done sea chest style. If any of you are parts of the CNC for Beginners Facebook page, this is our cover photo. You may have seen that before. On the crest here for the EOD emblem, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, I used a spire to take apart the file and remake the three different parts in different wood species, give it a little contrast. The box joints were not done on my CNC because at that time I didn't have the end clamping capability for vertical milling that I do now. Now I do my box joints on the CNC, but this was done on my Incra router table. Those things are phenomenal. If you haven't seen one, it's a good idea to look up the videos on those. That has a display tray area for the awards the person earned and the flag. This one, similar to the Marine Corps one, but it's fire department for the U.S. Air Force. Oh, sorry, that's out of order. Another picture of the sea chest. These are just a few of the things I do and sell. There we go. This is the front of that fire department box. There's the eagle up above it. It's got the maple in place for the head so that it looks like an actual bald eagle. And then I inlaid all of the letters. And on the bottom section where it says U.S. Air Force, that's a maple inlay plus a walnut inlay into the maple. There's the box with the doors open. This gentleman asked me, hey, I want the biggest shadow box you can make. How big can you make it? I said, man, if I go bigger than 30 inches across and 42 inches tall, your wife's going to kill me. Well, I guess when when he received it, he called me. He said, "She's crying." Apparently, she was a little bit overwhelmed by how big it was. When the doors are open, it's a full 60 inches across. You can see the hinges here.
Will other things go inside that?
Yeah, all of his awards went inside of that. You see these hinges here. They're a SOSS brand, hidden hinges. I use the CNC to mortise those in place. This one here might fit your liking, Ted. This is a fire department shadow box, 3 feet across, 3 feet tall. That's Paduke with walnut inlay and walnut, well, it's all inlay in a manner of speaking. It stands proud, as you can see in this picture, right along the edges here. This is all standing proud, as are the numbers. I inlaid them also in order to give a little bit of a easier, what do you want to say, easier setup. There I am standing next to it.
Oh, wow, it's pretty big.
Yeah, 3 feet wide is pretty big. The guy that asked for it, or the department rather that asked for it, was up in northern Washington, right next to the Canadian border. And when they got it, the gentleman, Chief Barr, that retired from there, he just absolutely was in tears, from what I understand. And then the person who they hired to replace him died in a car crash, so he had to come back and remain the chief for another year or so until they could find another. Most of what I sell is this shadow box right here. That has a walnut inlay in oak, and that's for U.S. Air Force Master Sergeant. That's the most common one I sell. This gentleman got his shadow box. I always call my customers if I have their number. I'll call them and say, "Hey, how you doing? Enjoying retirement? What have you? Enjoying the piece that you had made?" This guy said, "You know what? I was about to enjoy retirement, and then I re-enlisted because they offered me a good package." So he went right back in. This is my wife's uncle and aunt. They're about to celebrate 75 years of marriage. He was a survivor of the Battle of the Bulge. And he saw one of the shadow boxes I made, one of his visits up here, and he said, "You know what? When I die, will you make mine?" I said, "I'm not waiting that long. I'll make it right now." So that was my next project, was to make his. His sons and daughters arranged all the awards inside. This is another Air Force. I get a lot of Air Force customers. I guess word of mouth is important, so people keep sharing my work and enjoying it. With the CNC, I do the etching in the brass and everything else, but the glass etching up here where you see his name, that is done with acid etch. So I have a vinyl cutter, and I cut a stencil mirror image so that it etches it on the interior. And then when the lights get turned on, it refracts the light inside of the box off of the etching. So it'll show up the letters real nicely when the lights are on. And those just have a LED strip inside with the battery box, so they can take the batteries out. They don't have to have a cord dangling.
Now, is that a piece that's hung on the wall?
Go ahead.
Is that a piece that's hung on the wall?
It is. Right now it's obviously just sitting on my table saw, but that would be hung on his wall. And I
So how thick is it?
How big is that?
No, thick.
Oh, thick. It's 4 inches deep when it's complete.
Okay.
Most of the shadow boxes I make end up being about 4 inches deep, other than the large, the ones with doors. I usually make those about 5 or 6 inches. Depends on the person's liking. If they want it real narrow, I will make it narrow. I thought the walnut on the bottom of this turned out really spectacularly. I even used the CNC to cut out these pieces of the star. I set the star up and then divide up the pieces into 5 for each point so that the rays of the oak look like, in my opinion, look like a starlight shining out. There's a lady in Germany. I've shipped shadow boxes all the way to Germany and Turkey, and anywhere people want them shipped, they go there. Costs a lot of money, but the customer wants it. That's what they get. This lady got her retirement celebration in Germany, so that's where we shipped it to. And she asked for blue dye on the wood, so I used maple on these stripes and dyed it blue. There's a product by Sherwin-Williams that is a beautiful blue dye if you're ever looking for something like that. So now we're about to get into the part where I start talking about vacuum pressing. What you see here on the screen are paperclip holders. My sister ordered from me 2 Christmases ago. She wanted to have paperclip holders that had magnets in them. So I did a double-sided carving. On the bottom side, I did pockets for magnets. You can see all these epoxied in here. And on the top side, I did, well, there's the veneer that goes on the bottoms. On the top side, I did a 3D carve for 2 different cups for the paper clips. So the way I do this, I resawed off a portion of walnut that matched this in color with my bandsaw, made the pockets, made the 3D carving, and then used the vacuum press, which is normally they're used for applying a veneer like this. So this has the veneer on the bottom of the piece, and when you take it out of there and clean off the outside edges of it, you could just barely see the line where it's glued on here. Once it's sitting on your desktop, it's never even noticed. If you wanted to do, well, we'll get to that in a second. Getting ahead of myself. If you want to do any type of veneer work and you don't happen to have a vacuum bag, you can also use clamping cauls. I've done it with a large block of like white oak that's dead flat. That works really well. A 2-inch block of white oak or some nice hardwood that you know is going to remain flat. You need that on the top and then equal support on the bottom. But if you have a vacuum bag, you take, this is just MDF with plenum with a grid cut into it on the CNC. This here port where my mouse cursor is where the hose is hooked up through the bottom. These channels, excuse me, allow for airflow. This foam here is an open cell foam that allows air to be pulled through it as well. And it helps keep the glue off of the MDF so that the part doesn't glue down to it. So you have a vacuum plenum and a vacuum bag. The bags are usually 35 mil or thicker. They don't tear or break. They're tough as can be. Well, I should quantify that. They don't tear or break so long as you're not vacuuming them around something extremely sharp-edged. I have torn a bag. They all come with a repair kit of some sort, like patching a bicycle tire. Say again?
What size bag is that one?
This one here is, it'll fit a 2-foot by 3-foot plenum, and that's what's sitting in it right now. So if you guys are interested in vacuum bags like this, no matter what pump you have, you can get the bags from vacupress.com. I'll have a link to that website shown on the screen in a bit here, and you can write it down. They have the pumps, the bags, all the hoses, everything you could need. Let's see here. Okay, so back to the veneered bottom and the thing sitting there. You can see this one has a veneer on the bottom. as well. And then this is what the tops looked like before the finish went on. I counted that these held, I think it was 130 paper clips before things started falling off. Both cups, that is. So here's my setup. I've got this double layer of MDF. The top one, I just threw some glue down and glued them together. The top one has the grid in it, and the hole over here that is going through it is about 5/8 of an inch. That fits the plastic adapter that holds the hose end. The hose end has a brass fitting on it, basically a brass pipe pressure fit into it. This also works phenomenally well for inlays. You can see the male portion of the inlay up here and the female portion. This customer wanted a pair of signs for her boyfriend's man cave. So he is a colonel down in, oh shoot, I think it's Alabama or one of those states near there. He's in charge of the Army's artillery division, artillery training. So the other sign I made for him is artillery emblem on it. So what you do, you just like your normal clamping setup, get your male and female ready, put your glue on, put your male in there, and slide it into the bag and turn on your pump. Once the bag's sealed, that's it. That's all you need to do. You don't need any other clamping, any such thing. I was talking to Ted about this earlier, and I counted up going around here for all these different pieces, which each one has a different word on it. I would need close to 30 or 40 clamps to get all that clamped up. That sign was 3 feet long and 23 inches high. I would need more clamps than I have. My shop it's just a small one-man shop, and I just have enough clamps and glue boards together on edge so that I can put them on my CNC and get moving. Then I use my vacuum press for all other clamping if I can get away with it. So here you can see the outside edge of the bag. You've got a Velcro strip here on the bag and the mating piece on the other side of the bag. Pardon me, not the other side of the bag. The same side of the bag, you just fold it over. Slide this PVC or ABS through. I guess that one's PVC, and this one's probably ABS. Then you snap that. It's a little bit bigger than this. If you have the two separated from the bag, this slides in and out like lightning. It's a real loose fit. So then when you put this black sheath over it, it crimps the bag around that hole. You could also just roll it over. I have a bigger bag also I'll talk about in a minute. You can just roll it over and clamp it to a 2x4. You don't necessarily have to have the plastic, but it comes with all the bags. They provide a appropriate size length plastic piece for the bag when they ship it to you. And for those of you interested, the vacuumpress.com people are over in Maine. So if y'all are over on that side, it might be quicker shipping than it was to me. I think it took 3 weeks to get to me for some reason. Here you can see the hose coming up into the bottom of the plenum, and you can see the workpiece up top. There it is, getting vacuum pressed. So right at this is a screenshot out of a video that I took, and this is me turning on the pump and then waiting for it to finish up pulling the air out. So vacuum holds atmospheric pressure on the pieces. So every square inch of this has 14 pounds. That means every square foot has 1 ton of pressure, 2,017 pounds, something like that, of pressure per square inch or PSI. I shouldn't say never. You're rarely going to get that much clamping force that equally distributed with any cauls or hand screw clamps. The advantages here are phenomenal. You could use a big press if you had it, hydraulic press, but making sure your calls are just right versus a vacuum bag that pulls it down perfectly evenly all around it is pretty slim chances to get the exact same evenness of pressure. There it is. I emptied it out to take the pieces out. Oh, there's another one of it full of vacuum, I should say. Is that the right way to say it? Full of vacuum? Sounds like a good way to say it. So for those of you who are just joining us, I've seen about 4 people come on since I've been talking. My name is Chet Weatherl, and I do custom woodworking for a lot of people. This is an example of how we use vacuum pressing for a veneer or inlay circumstance. So let me back up the picture a little bit here, and I'll show you guys that just joined the beginning parts. Right here, we've got the vacuum bag with the plenum. There's a hose right here coming through the plenum, or being able to pull air through the plenum. Sorry, my computer decided to take a break. Be patient with me. I got the spinning wheel of death for some reason.
So, Chet, do you buy this all as a kit?
Say that again, please.
Do you buy this all as a kit, the bag and the plenum and all that?
The plenum I made. The bag and the pump are all from the same company, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, back at it here, I think. All right, so now what's going on here?
Hey, Chet, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
On that picture that you just showed with all the pieces, you said you would have had to have all different kind of clamps. Yeah. Yes, that one. Uh-huh. I was noticing that the inlay portion, the maple that you were making, it looks like from the pictures that they're different thicknesses.
Yes, they are.
Does that matter with the vacuum bag doesn't care, right?
It doesn't, within reason.
Okay.
I happen to have some really close-looking grain patterns of maple that were varying thicknesses. As you can see, these top ones up here are a 3/4 inch board, and these were 1/2 inch. So
Okay.
I have a really large Laguna bandsaw, 16-inch Pro model, and I can resaw up to 13 inches with it. It's got a 3.5 horse motor on it. So I do a lot of my own resawing and milling of lumber. And these pieces here, I just happen to have a long board that would work to make 1/2 inch thick inlays. So what I said a moment ago was it doesn't matter how thick they are within reason. When I've done inlays, I've found that as long as the backer piece here is at least a 1/2 inch thick, you're good to go. So if you start out with a 3/4 inch board, or at the very thinnest, a 1/2 inch board, you're pretty much okay. And with the vacuum bag, you have a lot more leeway than you do with regular clamps. However, the thicker the board, the more easy it is to clamp evenly. So if you don't have the vacuum press, you can still do inlays with regular clamping and calls, but you're going to want to make sure you have a nice thick backer on it. The thicker the backer on the inlay, like this one here, or the top two, the better off your clamping pressure will be distributed. So with the vacuum bag, I decided to test it, and I did one on a 1/4 inch thick piece of maple just to see what I could get. It clamped it real evenly, and I didn't see any deficits in the inlay. I think it turned out really well. But it was, sorry, my computer's fritzing on me for some reason. It didn't, I don't know how to say it. It didn't quite feel right to me. Felt better when it was ½ inch or thicker. I do apologize for this inconvenience. Does anybody have any questions while we wait for the spinning wheel of death to end?
Now, we don't see it on our end. Whatever's going on in your computer, we're not seeing
Okay.
it. We're seeing the picture of your inlay still.
Okay. My computer's deciding to just take a little pause. I'm not sure why. Trying to get back to my main pictures.
Do you, while you're waiting, I can take over control and put up the link to the vacuum press supply plates, or do you have that?
That would be great. Do that.
Okay, so I'll take over. Let me open up my my browser, and you're going to have to tell me. You're going to have to tell me where it is. I'm going to take back control. Okay, and what's the name of it?
Vacupress.com. VACUPRESS.com.
There it is. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share mouse control, and now you can go ahead and take control of my computer.
Okay. So if you guys look at this website here, there are a couple different products. Let's see if I can get onto the products page. Oops. Sharing the mouse is a little tricky. Sorry.
It looked like you chose the vinyl bag versus the poly bag. Have you tried either or both?
Both the ones I have are the vinyl bag.
And they've
So
lasted pretty long for you?
Sorry?
They've lasted pretty long?
Yes. I have one. The big one I have is, I think it's 10 feet wide and 15 feet long. And I can do vacuum forming of different veneers around different forms. I can do that in any of them. And if I can get my pictures to come back up and work correctly, you'll be able to see an example of that. So here are the different pumps. Sorry.
You've had that bag for over 10 years, right?
The big one, yeah. The little one I just got because I was tired of using the big one when I didn't need to. I think the little one was $80 or something of that nature. So the different pumps here, they talk about different CFMs. That's cubic feet of air per minute. I'm sure you all know that. 6 CFM this is the pump I have right here. And it has auto cycling on the pump itself. What that means is it'll maintain the vacuum that it has pulled, and you can set that to any amount. These pumps down here that are less expensive, like the 1 CFM pump, from what I understand, I've never used one or seen one in action, but from what I understand, they just evacuate the air out of the bag less quickly. So the pump runs longer if you have a larger bag. And that really is the only drawback from them. They may or may not have the pressure maintenance to maintain the same amount of pressure throughout the cycle. So when I am gluing up inlay or veneer or any such thing, the shortest amount of time I leave anything in glue is 1 hour. I find that with 1 hour of set time, the glue is almost always adequately set. If I'm doing a production run of something and I have multiple parts, I'll set it in there, clamp it for an hour, pull it out, set the next part in there. Or if I use the big bag, I can put a bunch of parts in there all at the same time. I'm going to check back at my pictures now, see if I can get back control of that. All right, I've got picture control back now, Ted.
My microphone was off, so you weren't hearing me. Is this the vacuum bag that you use?
Yes, that is.
Okay, and you said about $80 because the price varies upon the size you buy?
Yeah, the $80 was the smallest one they offer. That's a 2x3. Lately, I've been doing a lot of smaller items. The big bag is from when I worked in the cabinet shop. The guy that I worked for, he and I and our crew, we did all these really large conference tables, like 24-footers and 16-footers, and also the entryway, receptionist desks in foyers of lawyers' offices and things like that. So we would make big forms and then put what's called bindi board on there. And I'll show some pictures of that in a little bit here when I take over the control again.
Yep. Okay. So let me. Okay, just pass it back to you. You'll have to accept.
All right. So here we are. Apologize again for the delay.
And if your screen's not large, go ahead and maximize it, guys, so you got full screen.
Okay. So back to what I was discussing a moment ago, with the inlays on the pieces and the glue in between, all you have to do is turn the pump on after the bag has been sealed up, and you can pull vacuum. Vacuum equals 14 pounds per square inch or a ton per square foot. So atmospheric pressure multiplied by 144 for your square inches. That gives you, so, if you're way up high in the mountains, it may not be 14 pounds, but it's going to be pretty close to a ton of pressure per square foot. So after I get those set for an hour, I let these set overnight on this particular item because that's what I had available. It worked out that way. I resawed this one on the bandsaw and sent it through my drum sander. So what I do is I resaw with about a 1/16 of an inch of material left between the finished piece and the offcut. And then I just send it through. Each pass I take off maybe a 1/64 of an inch, maybe a little bit less. And there's the finished product. You can zoom in on it. There's not any gaps. It's absolutely flawless. Every letter is crisp and clean. And that's all thanks to the even pressure created by the vacuum bag. The clamping force is unbeatable. The evenness of it is unbeatable. This is the big sign that you guys saw earlier. I had to mill that off with the CNC, all the letter blanks. So sadly, in my opinion, I'm a wood miser. I hate throwing wood away. So I was really disappointed I had to mill that off. I couldn't fit it through my big bandsaw because it was too tall.
Are you finding that a specific type style works better, like this particular type style inlaid than others?
Oh, not at all. Pardon me. I'll show you in other pictures here, different inlays. You can do virtually any inlay. Here's the pumps that I took a screenshot of that we just saw. Here's the website. Let me see. Go back here to the main picture page. I think I left on there. Oh, I didn't. Let me switch to another album and see. No, there's nothing there. Switch back over here.
Chet, my name is
Yes.
Tim. I have a question.
Sure.
You were just showing that that inlay, and you mentioned that you processed it, resawed it, basically, sent it through the drum sander. Putting it back on the CNC would basically just be inefficient. Planing it over again.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I meant by being a wood miser is I'd like to reuse those pieces for more inlays later if I could. Like this here had. Let me open that. That's bloodwood with yellow heart inlaid. So it's a real bright red wood, real bright yellow, like was on the the Gunnery Master Sergeant box.
He wasn't logged in at that time, but
oh, okay, sorry.
But he'll go back and watch the video and see it.
Right.
So this here, as Ted was asking earlier, does any typeset matter? When it comes to inlays, unless you happen to have a mistake in your wood, a little check or something that causes a chip out, there really isn't any reason to not use whatever typeset suits your fancy. And now my picture is frozen again. Good grief. So you can see at the bottom of this, there's normal squared off cornered typeset, and then the top is real fancy curls or what have you. There we go. Back to it now, I think. This inlay here, I saw that design on somebody's Instagram page, I think, and I looked for a picture online, a piece of clip art that had something similar to this, and I traced everything on there and created the inlay where we've got the black walnut inlaid into maple. That took, I've got an idea, create it on the CNC software, and go from there. And it took me just a matter of a few minutes. I'm looking for a particular inlay here it is. I make custom cribbage boards also. I don't know if any of you guys play cribbage. Open up. There we go. The letters up here on this board are that big L is no more than a 1/2 inch tall. And that is the one I was talking about a minute ago where I was saying that I used a real thin piece to see how well it would work, Ted.
Mm-hmm.
That's the item that I produced with that real thin piece. I didn't find that it clamped poorly at all in the vacuum bag. It worked really well. But when you get that small of a letter, that small of a typeface, it becomes hard to make certain it's aligned. And then when you pull your hand out of there, say, I would put this top portion of the cribbage board in the bag, all carved, and then I would already have the glue in the female portion, take the male portion in my hand, slide it in through the bag, and set it in place. But then even sometimes when you pull it out, the bag will distort it and push it aside a little bit. And that on that small of a typeface could become an issue. So what I did on this one was just use masking tape and put some tape on each side to hold it in place after I put it in the right spot. And we'll go back to the vacuum bagging. Here are some of the shadow boxes that I make for some of you who have recently joined. I run
Hey, Chet,
wood
I
shop.
just want to mention to the guys, if you're not talking, turn your microphone off because we hear the stroking in the background. Thanks. Go ahead, Chet.
I run a one-man wood shop out of my garage here in Camas, Washington, we're just about 15 minutes to the Columbia River and Portland, Oregon. So if any of you are familiar with Portland International Airport, I'm near that. I get to go over there. There's all kinds of places to buy great hardwoods, and I'm able to get different ones like the red on these fire department shadow box. It's a beautiful Paduke. All right, so back to vacuum bagging. I'm going to talk to you guys about forming with a form. I decided to use a small plenum, and I just took this piece of old countertop and took it over my table saw to cut some kerfs in it for the airflow to fit through. So I didn't use the big plenum, and in hindsight I should have, because I forgot to round over the corners on this particular chunk of countertop, and it did tear the bag just a little bit. I was able to fix that with no problem with the repair kit. But you got to make sure the plenum has either semi-malleable corners or round them over ahead of time with at least an 1/8 inch round over bit. That way it doesn't tear anything. So what I'm doing here, when you get to the end of the pictures, you'll see the final results, but I'm making a skirt for a round table. I took what's called bendy board plywood, made these forms out of 3/4 inch plywood on my CNC, and then aligned them, sanded them to a perfect fit together so there would be a smooth fit, covered them with packing tape. You can see some of the packing tape sticking down here. And then the bendy board plywood was covered over with some open cell foam, which allowed the product to be pulled down. I held it down temporarily with masking tape in the center, and once I put it in there and pulled the vacuum form, it pulled it right around the form with almost zero spring back. I find that Titebond 3 works really, really good for that. It allows a longer setup time. So I laid out, I think this is 7 layers here of plywood, and then I laid those out on my workbench, or this crummy little table I temporarily had to use before I built my workbench. And then I would slather a bunch of glue on and align them up, put the masking tape on, and put it in the bag and pull vacuum. Once you get that done, you've got your form to shape. Then I joint one edge, run it through the bandsaw. There's my big bandsaw. If you guys aren't familiar with Laguna's bandsaw and haven't experienced cool blocks, which are ceramic inserts instead of bearings, they're phenomenal. Keep your blade nice and cool. Keep it clean while it's running. If you use a lot of pine or deciduous trees, evergreen trees, which have a lot of resin in them, that buildup on your bandsaw blades can be a real hassle, and these actually will keep it cleaner, so you don't have to clean your blade as often. Sorry, back to what I was talking about. I'd run it through the bandsaw here to cut it to size, drum sand it so that it's all smooth, and if the person had wanted, they wanted it painted black, but if they'd wanted, I would have put a veneer on here for them of their choosing. This is the underside of the table that I was making the skirt for. Can you all see my cursor? Okay. Here I took the offcuts, and after positioning the legs where they originally were, I made the angles appropriate for the legs and used that as templates for each of the finished pieces. Then they were on there, and then I just needed the bracing that goes across the legs between the two pieces, and that's there. So that has a bolt going through to the leg, and then it's glued and screwed to the skirt. Skirt is held on with buttons. I just made these in my shop. They're just a little piece of plywood, hole drill through it, and I used the router table to cut a little dado, I guess, inside of there for the button to latch onto. There's 2 of those on each skirt, on each section of the skirt, I should say. There's the final product. This guy, he said he wanted it refurbished. He bought it. It was the tabletop here was a old wooden pulley from the local paper mill. You guys ever heard of Crown Zellerback products? Maybe back in the 80s, they were real popular. They're paper products. That's a paper mill here in Camas. So the person who built the rickety table had just put 4-inch brass screws through the tabletop into these legs, and that was really unstable. So he had me put the vacuum form, or use the vacuum form to make a customized skirt for the table. And now it's as solid as can be, and he's going to put a slab circle of granite on there. Now that's about all I have to share in this hour of talking. You guys have any questions?
I think that was great. As you were scrolling through the pictures, I saw one of your wavy flags. Do you want to share that?
Oh, sure. I could go to that. Let's see. This one here, I've shared the file for this before. If anybody is really interested in it and doesn't have the file already, feel free to email me. I could give you my email address, or you could look me up on Facebook. My email address is Chet Weatherl, ChetWeatherl @gmail.com. I found this flag for free. I can't remember where I found the file now. Long time ago in one of the groups. I used maple, Paduke, and Purple Heart. And you just cut the long stripes out of one block, the short stripes out of another, and they all made up perfectly. I find that leaving an onion skin on the bottom of the pieces when you're cutting them out works really well, because some of these are less than a ½ inch thick. That causes a lot of them to chatter while you're cutting them out on the CNC. Now I've got that spinning wheel again. What's that?
The onion skin technique, in lieu of using tabs, a lot of people forget about that. And especially if you've got a drum sander, it really works great.
Yes, it does.
Because then you just leave a thin layer on it, and the whole part stays together. And then you just run it through the drum sander, and it sands it off, and now your pieces are apart.
Yeah.
Is that how you do it?
I do that a lot on my CNC. I also use masking tape and super glue. You guys aren't familiar with that?
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
It's a really good technique. You guys all know how to do that? You put a piece of masking tape down. You put masking tape on your table. You put masking tape on your part. And then you put super glue in between, and it'll stick. Saccharocyanide glue, the CA glue, and then in a minute or two it'll be hard. Then you can go ahead and mill your part, and then when you're all done, all you have to do is peel the tape off. The only issue that I found with that is if you were to get the part really hot, the glue won't break loose, or if you've got a lot of area, the glue might not be economically feasible for that.
Yeah, I find too, when I mill the parts for my shadow boxes, I find that if I'm doing anything that's requires over 12 inches of masking tape in length, using the accelerator for the CA glue really is a big, big help. Sometimes the inner parts won't cure because there's no air underneath the piece, so you got to make sure you got some way to cure the piece, or cure the glue rather.
Do you spray the accelerator on one piece of tape and put the glue on the other piece of tape?
Yeah, usually I put the glue on the tape that's on the table, and then I spray the accelerator on the mating piece on the work piece.
Okay.
But I never seem to have a problem unless the tape is 12 inches or longer.
Okay. Well, any of you guys, looks like we're coming up on our hour. Any of you have any further questions, feel free to ask them.
I had a quick question. I noticed you were using 2 sheets. Yeah. Did you find that 1 sheet was insufficient?
Oh, yeah, for the plenum on the vacuum bag.
Can you bring that picture back up, Chet?
Yeah, I actually have the spinning wheel of death again for some reason.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that, guys. The reason I used 2 sheets was simply for the little plastic grommet that the vacuum hose connects to. It is, let me think here, it's just over 1.25 inches tall. So when you have the 2 sheets, you got a good 1.5 inches of MDF, and that gives plenty of room for that to hide underneath. I tried it with 1 sheet, and I found out that it would suck to the bag. So you either have to put some mesh netting over it, or you need to just use 2 sheets of MDF. And realistically, using 2 sheets just gives you that much firmer of a plenum, and it, even though it's a little bit heavy, it seems to help a lot. When I use the really big bag, I will skip using a plenum altogether. If I'm doing a big form, I'll just do it on the garage floor. And then I just use some mesh netting over where the nipple comes into the bag. That mesh netting has to connect to the piece you're doing vacuum forming and flow over it as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that makes sense. Thank you.
So if I understand it, what you're saying is the plenum, the checkerboard area that you're letting the air go through underneath the part, you're using 2 pieces of 3/4 inch MDF to make that plenum.
That's exactly right.
So that plenum actually is 1.5 inches thick?
Yes, sir.
Now, are those pieces glued together?
Yeah, they're glued together. I just put some glue on there. I didn't even bother really aligning it. Put some glue on there and put it in the vacuum bag and clamped it down.
Now, I see yours is made out of just plain MDF, where other people have used melamine.
Yeah.
To stop the airflow from going through. Is there a preference with the vacuum bag?
Not really. The melamine is good, but like I was saying before, if you have sharp corners, it can actually cut through your vacuum bag.
Yeah, so you have to round everything off.
You use melamine, you got to round everything off, and MDF doesn't seem to cause that issue. Maybe because my MDF was a little beat up. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it doesn't really have to be anything other than flat when it comes to the MDF.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions? Just a fantastic job. I think it was a real interesting webinar. Looks like Jim might have a question. Turn your mic on, Jim.
No, he's giving thumbs up.
Oh, he's just giving a thumbs up. Okay. All righty. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us tonight and sharing your email address and the link to the vacuum press. I'm sure if people have questions, they can fire off you a personal email, and I know you're always happy to answer the questions. But we really want to appreciate you for coming on and sharing your expertise. I just want to remind others that if you know of anybody or you've got a topic and you can contact someone that would like to come on and speak on our webinar, please get a hold of them and have them contact me, and I'd be glad to give them time on our webinars. We offer these webinars free of charge to help support education and learning from each other and networking. We try to do it the first Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So thanks again, and good night all.